إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد نقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا ومن الليل فتهجد به نافلة لك عسى أن يبعثك ربك مقاما محمودا وقل ربي أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. أما بعد، إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد وشرور الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة. بسم الله، الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد. Alhamdulillah, we're able to gather together on the Jum'ah right after Salatul Eid, right after the day of Eid, right after we celebrated the amazing legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we're able to gather together as Jum'ah today, even though it's in a space that's different than where we typically have Jum'ah. What I wanted to share today in today's brief reminder as we gather together is continue with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as Sa'd ibn Mas'ud reported that the khutbah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was nothing illa tadhkira, was nothing but just a small reminder, something we already knew, but somehow it had a profound effect on us every single time he said it. And what I recited today was actually a small passage from Surah Al-Isra, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam makes a dua in the Quran, and I wanted to just share with us, and toward the end of the khutbah, wanted to share what that dua is and how it relates to our lives, specifically as we're starting a new semester. Alhamdulillah, it is just 1 week, 2 weeks, we're about to complete the second week of the semester. Many of us, that reality is just hitting us as what our lives this semester is going to look like. The first week, many times there's that excitement that we just are about to begin. We're excited the week before school starts. What are we going to do this time? But around the second week is when you hit that lull of, okay, assignments have started picking up. Now I'm getting into the reality of what this semester looks like. And actually the ayah I wanted to share was a dua of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when he was in a very similar state, when he was about to start making his preparations to go to Hijrah. And we're going to get to that in a second. But it's very similar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just a small point about du'as in the Quran. When a du'a is preserved in the Quran, it's something very, very special. Not just because it's someone who Allah decided to preserve in their Quran. The speech was so beloved to Allah that He preserved it for all of humanity to hold on to later on. That's part of it. The other part of it is we get language of how to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for things. But also a component of it has to do with, we learn about the mentality of the individual making a dua. We learn about what are the priorities we're supposed to make dua for, what we're supposed to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for in our lives. Because Allah loves these callers, these people who call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much that He preserved it. And we see what was important to them as their du'as are preserved. We just celebrated Eid, which is a legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, if there's one person whose mentality is preserved in the Quran throughout his life, it's Ibrahim alayhi salam. The first du'as we have recorded from him is when he's younger and he's asking Allah for guidance. Oh Allah, give me guidance. And then later on, we have him asking dua for his father. Then later on, we have him asking dua, oh Allah, strengthen prayer in my life. And then later on, when he has children, his du'as revolve around my children, make them righteous, make them an amazing nation, make their children amazing. And then toward the end of his life, when he recognizes, Alhamdulillah, I've raised my children a certain way, and I hope that Allah preserves my children in that way. Oh Allah, make this land blessed. Make this nation blessed. We see his mentality progress in his du'as. And in a similar way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's only 3 instances where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his du'as are preserved in the Quran. And in Surah Isra is one of these times. This is a moment in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam which is extremely difficult for him. It's toward the end of the Meccan period where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the rest of the believers are being persecuted. They're being actually driven out of their homes, and the plan and the commandment of going to Medina has been said. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there's narrations that report of how much longing he had, how beloved the Kaaba, how beloved the city of Mecca was to him. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there's a specific narration in which toward the last days that he went up to the Kaaba, and he went up to the Kaaba and he goes, I love this place. And he's talking to the Kaaba like it's an entity. I love you. And if it wasn't for my people driving me out of this place, I wouldn't have left. I wouldn't be planning on leaving. But he says goodbye to the Kaaba, and it's a very touching moment. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to the city itself, actually he loved the Kaaba so much that all of us probably already know that in the beginning, the qibla of salah, where we turned our heads to pray in salah, is actually, it wasn't toward the Kaaba. It was actually to Masjid al-Aqsa, the house of worship that Ibrahim alayhi salam also had built. We actually faced that. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam loved the city of Mecca so much, loved the Kaaba so much, that he would align himself in a way in which he could pray to the Kaaba, just that's the way geography works. He would pray to the Kaaba and he could pray to Masjid al-Aqsa at the same time. But then he comes to a realization that when he moves to Medina, he can no longer do that. This beloved object, this beloved home to him, is not going to be his home for much longer. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in that moment of realizing change is about to happen, realizing that his home is about to be changed, his experience is about to be changed, he's about to embark on this journey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him instruction. أقم الصلاة بدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises him, أقم الصلاة, which seems like a pretty strange thing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're preparing for a journey, you're preparing to leave your home, establish salah in your life. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this in a couple of different places in the Quran to kind of advise people when major change is about to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tazawwada. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises people when they're about to go to Hajj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says tazawwada. That when you're going to Hajj, make sure to take the safest route. And for us in current day, make sure that the company you go with is reliable. Pack an extra copy of your passport if you can make copies somehow. Make sure the companions you go with are proper. All of this is kind of captured in the zawwadu. Like, make sure that you prepare. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he's talking to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in this very trying moment in his life, says, Aqim as-salah. Make sure to establish salah, and not just any salah. لِدُلُوكِ الشَّمْسِ إِذَا غَسَقِ اللَّيْلِ. Make sure that you're doing salah from the time that the sun sets to the time of where it's completely dark at night. Make sure you pray throughout your day. And this is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is after Isra and Mi'raj, where the commandments of the 5 prayers were already commanded. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is not someone who isn't attached to salah already. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when there's going to be a change in your life, establish salah. The people around you might change, the landscape around you might change, but if you want to be prepared in that moment, aqim as-salah, make sure your connection, silla is the word connection, make sure your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is strong. When you're approaching that new moment in your life, make sure that that attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is strong throughout your day, and specifically, وَقُرْآنَ الْفَجْرِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, pray throughout your day, but if there's one thing you can't forget, it's Quran al-Fajr. And I could talk the rest of this khutbah. I'm not going to because I want to get to the dua that was the major point of this khutbah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it Al-Quran al-Fajr. That specifically, out of all of your salah, make sure that Quran is recited at Fajr. Inna Quran al-Fajr kana mashhuda. That verily the Quran of Fajr. There's actually no other place where this idafa construction is used, comparing the Quran one-on-one with Fajr. But this is the only time in the Quran that this is done. But it says, make sure that the Quran of Fajr, that's something you preserve. And there's something beautiful I just want to share about that, is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is about to embark on a very big journey. And actually, this is in Surah Al-Isra, about the journey of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam into the heavens. And it's a big gift for him for all that he's been suffering. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the analogy that salah, and specifically waking up in the morning for Fajr and having that intimate connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's light coming into your life. No matter what you're about to go through, no matter what darkness you're going to be going through, whatever this journey is going to put in your way, if you at the very least are attached to the guidance of Allah early in the morning, that is light throughout your day. The scholar, specifically Fakhruddin al-Razi, talks about this verse and he takes it to a much more spiritual level. He says what's actually being talked about here isn't necessarily just the situation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's talking about the moment in between the passing of Isa, or the end of the message of Isa alayhi salam, of Jesus, the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be on him, and actually the revelation of the Quran with Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That was a period of darkness, and finally Al-Quran al-Fajr, that finally the light, the Quran al-Fajr was given to them. That connection was re-established with the believing community. That's what's being said when it says Al-Quran al-Fajr. So no matter what dark times we're about to go through, no matter what dark time Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is feeling that he's about to leave his home, attach yourself to Quran al-Fajr, attach yourself to that recitation, to that salah of Fajr, and that will get you through the rest of your day. That will get you through wherever you, whatever feelings you're going through. But make sure that that connection is strong. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then continues, وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَتَهَجَّدُ بِهِ. And actually for those people that have already established Quran al-Fajr, for them, stand up at night and pray. And this isn't for everyone. This is specifically, the scholars say, for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that this is a commandment for him, that فَتَجَدْ بِهِ نَافِلَةً لَكَ عَسَىٰ أَن يَبْعَثَكَ رَبُّكَ مَقَامًا مَحْمُودًا. And actually do this so that your Lord can raise you up in a much higher station, maqaman mahmuda. And this is with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it's a lesson also to us. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saying, being told that actually for you, stand up even in the middle of the night and pray, because Allah is preparing you for a much better position. Rasulullah is kind of unsure of himself because he's about to leave his home. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, and this is something we know from the hadith literature and from other ayat in the Quran, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is going to have maqam mahmuda in a separate place in Surah At-Tawbah. Actually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Rasulullah will be raised on the day of judgment, and everyone will be raised on the day of judgment, and no one will have the authority to speak other than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who in that moment is going to be raised up, and he makes a worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one has made before him. And he's actually going to ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that we don't know, that none of us have been kind of given that knowledge. But Rasulullah says something very interesting in that moment in a specific hadith in which he calls Allah Rabbat al-Bayt, master of the house. And it's interesting because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as he's making preparations for this journey of leaving his homeland, of starting this new experience, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, connect yourself with me and actually prepare yourself for that station. Prepare yourself for maqam al-mahmuda. This journey that you're having is going to seem trivial when it's going to be compared to the journey you're about to go on, when the journey that comes after the day of judgment. That's the one to prepare for. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, and this is the point of the khutbah, what I wanted to really share today. وَقُلْ رَبِّي أَدْخِلْنِي مُدْخَلَ صِدْقٍ. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after being given all of those assurances, makes a dua, or Allah instructs him to make a dua, and he makes this dua. Rabbi, O my Lord, adkhilni, cause me to enter mudkhala sidqin, cause me to enter into a place with truth. It can be translated, mudkhala sidqin can be translated in many different ways, but cause me to enter a place that is truthful, or cause me to enter a place with truth, and sidqin is used, with tranquility, with a lot of positive connotations that are just associated. Cause me to enter a place fully. Sidqin is also to commit to something completely. Ya Allah, allow me to enter into a place fully. وَأَخْرِجْنِي مُخْرَجَ صِدْقٍ, and allow me to also leave wherever I'm in right now truthfully, with respect, with dignity, with a full heart. And this is the dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the scholars differ, saying, is this Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam really talking about the descent, the departure from him from Mecca to Medina? Because if that was the case, wouldn't it say, oh Allah, allow me to leave this place with dignity, and allow me to enter into a new place with dignity, allow me to leave this place in truth, and enter into a new place with truth. But that's not the order that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this in with. So Makhshari actually makes a comment on this verse specifically, and he says this is actually a lesson for the believers, that if you ever find yourself that you want to leave a place, that if there's a certain habit you have that you want to get rid of, there's a certain group of company that you have that you can't get yourself away from, there's thoughts that you're having that constantly take up your mind, the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and how he advised his companions even was never to leave it first and then start something good. Start something good. Enter into a good gathering. Enter into something good. Make your mind busy with something that is better. And then after that, you'll be able to leave something completely. After you've entered something good, will you be able to leave something in a proper way? مُدْخِلَ صِدْقٍ وَأَخْرِجْنِي مُخْرَجَ صِدْقٍ. And so allow me to have a full and truthful entrance into wherever I'm going, and allow me to have a full and complete exit out of where I'm leaving from. And scholars have also said this is actually talking about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, not just preparing for his departure from Mecca to Medina, but this is also about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam departing from this world onto the next world. It's the same way. You put your first foot forward, you start preparing for the next life, and then everything in this life becomes very easy for you. That's the message that's being brought over here. If there's a habit that you want to get rid of, indulge yourself completely in a good habit. And that one that you weren't so proud of, you can step out of it a little bit easier. That's kind of the message that's being brought here. And for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's this putting down of confidence. Start preparing for your journey. Start preparing for forming that amazing community in Medina, and Allah will make your exit from the city something that you can be proud of, something that you can do as sidqin, as something that is noble, as something that is trustworthy, as something that has truth behind it. Just start preparing for your journey forward, and the things that in your past or what you're currently in, they will become much easier for you as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finishes off, and I'll finish the first portion of the khutbah with this. وَجَعَلْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا. And the last portion of this dua, and make from yourself, وَجَعَلْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ, from specifically مِن لَدُنْكَ, Ya Allah, grant me specifically from yourself, سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا. What is typically translated in the translation I have over here is as a supporting authority. Ya Allah, give me supporting authority that comes specifically from you. And actually what's going on here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that when you make a decision, make sure, ask Allah for confidence in that decision. Wherever you're stepping into, ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you confident in taking that step. Make you someone who does not have to look back and constantly keep second guessing themselves. Ya Allah, make me confident in the decisions that